Hello, welcome back to The Big Stage, brought to you by bettingexpert.com, where we run through the upcoming Premier League fixtures and hopefully find you the best bets available throughout. Now, I know that some of the games are probably going to be postponed, or we do have issues surrounding COVID, but we will get to those as we go through the show. But it gives me great pleasure to say that I'm joined once again by Rory Jennings, Ben Dinnery and Dan Jenkins. Chaps, welcome aboard to The Big Stage once again. Rory, I want to start with you, and just as a fan, from a fan's perspective, this COVID outbreak, what's going on? What's your take on it?
I mean, it's so frustrating, isn't it? I'm truly dreading the potential of Christmas without football. I mean, it feels like a rite of passage following your team on Boxing Day. And the fact that it's looking like there is potential for that not to happen. It's one of the first fixtures I look for. When the fixtures are announced, Boxing Day, New Year's Day, what's going on? Who are you playing? Who are you playing in the lull between Christmas and New Year? And the fact that we could lose that actually makes the whole festive period feel slightly diluted to me.
I mean, also, what's your take on, like, we saw the Brentford game, Burnley, Watford game getting cancelled last minute. So, I mean, how do you feel for those fans that travelled all that way to Burnley to then see their game cancelled?
Yeah, I think they need to be reimbursed. I think they completely need to be reimbursed. You can't reimburse people for their time and their level of commitment that they display following their team up and down the country, but they should certainly be financially reimbursed by their clubs. And then the clubs maybe need to have a conversation with on a bigger scale with who's making these rules so late, who's making these decisions, and why is it happening in so late? I think that's the issue. The issue isn't postponing football. If that's what's got to happen, then that's what's got to happen. But the issue is doing it a couple of hours before kickoff when people are on the road. They've spent lots of money. They've probably booked hotels, time off work. Following your football team is a commitment. And I feel like people who aren't into football, or people who make these fairly draconian decisions, they don't appreciate the level of commitment on display from football fans. It should be admired and preserved.
Absolutely. I'm in 100% agreement with you. We'll move on to Ben and your perspective on, just from the player's point of view, obviously the effects of COVID, if you actually contract it as a player. I mean, what kind of implications does that have? And also on the squads from a wider perspective.
I mean, it has huge implications. If you're looking from a manager's and a coach's perspective, just because a player is out of a 10-day isolation period, that doesn't mean that the symptoms of COVID just instantly stop. We've seen instances last season with Jamal Lascelles and Alan Saint-Maximin at Newcastle, players suffering from long COVID, so the after effects that linger for 6 to 8 weeks. The stresses and the strains on squads, maybe managers and coaches are forced to risk players unnecessarily, overplay, overload. So that exacerbates the situation in terms of injuries. But, for the players themselves, they're taken out of their routine, and they're not able to prepare as they would. They have minimal contact with, therapists in terms of treatments. Training schedules changed. Even how they prepare. In terms of football, it's all about focusing on the match. But there's all of these distractions that take away from that, and it does have implications. So COVID is it's a lot more than that virus and that 10-day self-isolation period. It can, it's like a rippling effect throughout the club.
I mean, and yeah, we'll hand over to Dan as well from the betting expert point of view. I mean, looking at the betting markets, we spoke about on previous shows how odds kind of fluctuate so much based on the rumours. So, I mean, how can we approach these weird times from a punting perspective?
Yeah, as you said, the odds fluctuate so much. We saw at the Brighton versus Tottenham game a few weeks ago, there were some injuries in the Tottenham camp, and markets were shifting and moving about. I think the best piece of advice I'd give to people now is to just follow team news, to follow injuries and illnesses, to lean on people like Ben. I think getting a good idea of who's injured and who's out is sometimes better than form and the ability of a team.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's dive into the first opening game we're going to dig deep into, and that is West Ham against Norwich. So West Ham host Norwich this weekend, with being really flying in the table compared to what we were maybe expecting at the start of the season. But David Moyes has come out and said in recent weeks as well that perhaps their performances aren't quite up to scratch what he wants them to do anyway. So Rory, I'll start with you. And I mean, are expectations at West Ham just too high compared to what they're capable of?
No, I don't think they're too high. I think their expectations are right. I think that you're expectations across the season adjust, don't they? The expectations that you display at one point in the season won't be the same as you do halfway through the season or whatever. And I think that what we've seen with West Ham, both last season and this season, is that they have huge ability and they should really be trying to break into that top four, because you could make a case for them for the fact that they should have done it last season. They had the opportunity to do it last season. They've started this season brilliantly. They've already beaten Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United this year. So they are capable, but it's whether they have the depth, whether they have the squad depth. That's what's ultimately going to cost them. If GSB back Moyes in the January transfer window, if they try and replace the goals that they lost when they sold Sebastian Haller, for example, if they really go for it, maybe bring Jesse Lingard in, maybe find another jewel in the crown at the back, Zuma's out, Ogbonna's out, somebody else to help Dawson. I truly believe that they're in the conversation for top four. They can do it. It's just whether GSB want to put their hand in their pocket in January.
I think, someone they've relied on as well is Mikel Antonio in the early part of the season, but he's gone into a bit of a goal drought, surprisingly, I guess. But how do you solve a problem like Antonio? Do they just have to wait till January, or does Moyes have to change things up a little bit to suit Antonio's game?
I think that the talent will shine through. I mean, all good strikers go through fairly barren spells, and I think that he's a very good player who causes problems irrespective of whether he's scoring goals or not. I think he's one of those strikers that is very valuable to have on the pitch, irrespective of his goal tally. Now, obviously, as a centre forward, he needs to be scoring goals as well. And West Ham United aren't blessed with a vast array of goal scorers, so they do need their main man to be firing. But I don't think they need to change too much with regard to Antonio. I think he will find his form. But what could really help him, for so many reasons, would be somebody else to share the goal burden, to take the attention off him, to ease the pressure on him. Maybe if he had another person up front with him, create a bit of space for him. I think they need a striker. And if they don't sign somebody that we know will score goals in January, I don't think they make top four. I think it's as simple as that. If they don't go for it in January, it won't happen.
Well, I think, Ben, you can come in here as well with regards to the injury updates, the players that West Ham are missing. I mean, who is out for them, and the key players that maybe Norwich can exploit, the fact that West Ham are missing so many.
Yeah, so the big one was the fifth, the sending off, Vladimir Kufal against Arsenal. And ordinarily, you can maybe look to the likes of Ryan Fredericks, Aaron Cresswell to come in that fullback spot. But those players have both been suffering from injuries. There is hope from David Moyes that maybe Aaron Cresswell can recover from the back problem that's been hampering him since he collided with the post against Manchester City. So in terms of that back line, as Rory alluded to, it is a little bit stretched. We know that Ogbonna's out for the season. Zuma, he's going to spend at least a couple of months on the sidelines. So they can't really afford anybody, to lose anybody else. They may have to play somebody out of position in this game, maybe Arthur Masuaku moving on to the opposite flank, or potentially switching their formation to a back three. So that remains to be seen. But again, it's going to be left up until the very last moment, with Aaron Cresswell being every opportunity to prove his fitness.
And Ben as well, sticking with you, I mean, just looking at Dean Smith and how he's kind of affected things a little bit at Norwich, what have you made of him and his start? Obviously, they weren't great against Villa, were they?
Yeah, I mean, look, a good start as we expected. There's a little bit of a new manager bounce in there. Maybe we're back to type with Norwich, but they're dealing with their own injury and COVID-related problems at the moment. Dean Smith certainly isn't happy. He did put a request into the Premier League to have their last game postponed, and that sort of fell on deaf ears. I know that, the league aren't keen to blanket postpone games. They've went ahead and they're missing, with a fairly small squad that he has to manage, losing 3, 4, 5 players to injury and illness has a big impact. It's a difficult game. But I don't think this is a one where they can, maybe there's an opportunity there for Norwich to at least put up a good fight against the Hammers. Like I say, they've got their own injury problems. They're going through a little bit of a lull. Mikel Antonio slightly out of form. I think it will be close. I certainly don't think West Ham will steamroller them.
Well, the bookies definitely aren't really giving Norwich a lot of hope in this one. I think they're around 8 to 9 or 9 to 1 to actually beat West Ham. But let's stick with you, Ben, as well, just to give you a little bit of putting you on the spot a little bit, but what are the keys for Norwich to get the victory here?
I think, Teemu Pukki is the main guy. He scored 5 of their 8 goals this season. So he is, but the Canaries need to spread where their goals are coming from. How they do that remains to be seen. I think Todd Cantwell, he's a big player for them, coming back to a little bit of form and a little bit of fitness. Hopefully he could be a great player. He was a player that was linked with Liverpool last time the Canaries were in the Premier League. And again, we've touched upon that West Ham defence. It's certainly not as watertight as it was. And if David Moyes is forced into a reshuffle, then maybe they can look to exploit some of those spaces at the back.
And then move over to Dan. Why are the bookies having West Ham as the favourites? What are the keys for a West Ham victory in this match?
Yeah, well, they're the better side, put it simply. One of the keys, I think, is to get Mikel Antonio back in form, as you guys have been talking about. He was actually first in the Premier League in terms of expected goals in the first 2 months of the season, higher than Mo Salah, at a figure of 5.78 XG in his first 7 appearances this campaign. Obviously hasn't scored in his last 2 months since then. His XG is just 1.02. So there are now 65 players with a higher figure than him in that time frame. They need to get back control of the ball. They've won 8 matches this season. They had to sit back and kind of cede possession in the recent wins against Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs. They had an average of 35% of the ball in that time. In the other 5 wins, that figure goes up to 54%. Those victories came against lower to mid-table teams, the sides that they've kind of struggled to beat in the last few months. I think they need to get back control of the ball. They also need to get Said Benrahma involved as much as possible. It's a similar situation to what they've got with Mikel Antonio. Benrahma's influence has fallen off a cliff. To kind of examine this, I looked at a data set called XG Chain. Basically adds together the expected goals for every phase of possession a player's involved in. It's a good way of seeing the most efficient and involved players in a team. Again, in those first 8 matches in the season, Benrahma was amongst the best in the Premier League. His XG Chain was 5.62, 11th in the whole league. Since then, that's dropped to 1.8 in 9 appearances. There are almost 150 players with a higher figure than that. So I think if West Ham can get that right, then they should get the win.
Now, I mean, looking at the bookies odds again, it's not a great deal of value in the 1x2, the full-time result market. But Dan, you've got a value bet for us in the total goals. So which way are you looking?
Yeah, as you said, there's not much value in the 1x2. So I've gone for goals. West Ham have been struggling to create good chances for a few weeks. They've had under 1.5 XG in 6 of the last 7 matches. The only one they had a figure higher than that was against Chelsea. So I do think Norwich have kind of stabilised under Dean Smith. The manager bounce is definitely over, and they're kind of back to where they were before, as Ben referred to. They aren't scoring goals, 3 in a row without scoring a goal for them. I can see a low-scoring one again here. Maybe West Ham to take a small win. So I've gone for under 2.75 goals. That's at 1.83 with Mansion Bet.
Lovely stuff. I'm backing that as well. I think it will be a comfortable win for West Ham, but not a massively high-scoring game. So I'm going for a 2-0 win. Rory, I think you're on a similar line of thinking, aren't you, for your prediction?
Yes, I just can't see a world where it doesn't end with a home victory, to be honest. I mean, I'm quite impressed with what Norwich are doing, but I just can't see a world where it doesn't end with West Ham winning.
And how about for you, Ben? Not another 1-1, is it?
Not this time. The home team just to edge it a little bit tighter. I think 1-0. I'm thinking of the wider picture, maybe the context of having, the 3rd game in a week, a little bit fatigue to factor in there. So I think they'll win, but like I say, just by a narrow margin, 1-0.
So yeah, as hopefully then we're all in agreement, and it's going to be a low-scoring affair, but an easy West Ham win. All right, now we're going to move on to some quick-fire predictions and run through some of the other games coming up this weekend. So the first game we're going to look at is Man United against Brighton. We've got a quick-fire prediction from Dan. We're going for Brighton plus a goal on the Asian handicap. So Dan, just take us through your thinking there. What do you see in Brighton to maybe give them a bit of an edge in this fixture?
Yeah, I think they do a result, and they just draw so many matches. It's usually pretty good value to give them half a goal or more. They keep things tied to both ends. They've only 2 of their last 13 matches have been settled by a margin of 2 or more goals. One of them was against Manchester City, so they've only conceded 3 in their last 4 as well. I like under on goals here as well. I think under 2.25 goals is a great bet at 2.37, considering the recent results of both sides. That was tempting, but I just went for Brighton on the Asian line. I think it gives a few more options in terms of score lines. I've gone for Brighton plus 1 goal. That's a 1.98 with Unibet. That way, if United win the match by exactly 1 goal, then you'll get your stake back.
Lovely. And Rory, you're in agreement with this as far as I can tell from your prediction?
Yes, I think so. I can see it being a draw. I've gone for the draw. I'm just not convinced with United at all. So I've gone. I can see Brighton getting something out of it. So that's what I've gone for.
Yeah, and I'm going a similar line, I think, and I'm going for a 1-0 United win. So obviously, yeah, like Dan alluded to, if you do place that bet, then you'll get your stake back. But Ben, you're going for a different line of thinking, I think, with the result for this game.
I am. I just think United will have too much. Of course, we're shooting into the unknown here. We do know that Manchester United had 19 positive COVID tests prior to the game with Brentford. We've since had more. We don't know how many of those first team players were affected. 17 did arrive for training on Wednesday morning, although some of those players were injured and just getting treatment. So, yeah, there's question marks with regards to that. But certainly Brighton, they lost some big players themselves. Lewis Dunk, Basuma, he picked up his fifth caution of the campaign. He's out. Veltman pulled up with a late hamstring problem midweek as well. So them, Neil Maupay, Pascal Gross. So Brighton are missing 12 players themselves. And while United have maybe got the size of the squad to be able to cope with that and the depth, I think Brighton just lack a little bit. And I think United will have too much power. And I'm going for 2-0.
All right, well, let's move on to the next game we're going to look at. That's Villa against Burnley. Now, I have to start off with Dan. You've said you're going to be backing Burnley on the Asian handicap a lot in the coming weeks. So just explain exactly why that is and if your line of thinking has changed at all since the last game.
Yeah, as you said, I spoke a few weeks ago about backing Burnley plus half a goal. It's honestly been like a cheat code so far this season in terms of value. I went for it last weekend. I'm going for it again here. But I think this is probably going to be the last time. I'm not as confident going into this one, so low stakes. Villa have stabilised after the appointment of Steven Gerrard, and they are looking good. And I kind of expect that new manager's bounce to end soon. Maybe this match, maybe in the next few weeks, but we'll see. I'm going low stakes on Burnley plus half a goal. That's a 2.12.
I mean, for me as a Villa fan, I have to disagree. I'm going for a Villa win, easy win actually for Villa. I feel like we did show really impressive signs against Norwich. They looked well organised as well. Maybe it just took too long to get that second goal and kind of kill off the game. So I saw a lot of promising things from Villa. That's why I'm going to be backing them to win. But Rory, let's have your take on Villa Burnley.
I've gone for a 1-1, primarily because I rate Burnley very highly. I think Sean Dyche is class. I really do. And I can't see Burnley going down. But for my prediction that Burnley don't go down to be true, they've got to start picking up some points somewhere. So I've kind of gone for it here because I feel like there is an inevitability that they will start getting points. And there's also an inevitability that Steven Gerrard can't get everything so right, can he? He's only lost to teams that, in theory, he should lose to. So I just kind of think that Sean Dyche is a wily, experienced manager, and maybe that could be to Steven Gerrard's detriment.
All right, well, let's move on. Ben, let's have your prediction for the Villa-Burnley game.
Yeah, echoing your thoughts here, Joe. I think Villa fairly comfortable, impressed with their result. Difficult game against their former boss on Tuesday night. So I'm going to go 2-0 Villa with Ollie Watkins to get back on the score sheet.
Great stuff. And a great addition to the fantasy team as well, I might add, because I did bring it in for Jamie Vardy. So he's doing well for my team. Anyway, we'll move on to Southampton, Brentford. And we want to be talking about injuries potentially here because there's some key players for Southampton. Maybe they've not had the highest volume of injuries or key men out, but it is those kind of the key players that are affecting them. So Ben, give us a quick injury update on Southampton and kind of what impact those injuries are having.
Yeah, so we had a big update last week. We know that Shea Adams picked up a hamstring problem in training. Now that's going to keep him out for quite a while. We still have no definitive time frame on that. But then we also seen an injury to Amanda Broja and also Adam Armstrong prior to the fixtures in game week 17. Now, fortunately, Broja, as we've seen, has recovered from that minor muscular issue, but that will have to be managed. With regards to Adam Armstrong, he's going to be out for a while. There's a bit of a calf issue. It was too painful to travel midweek. So what's happened there? That means Ralph Hasenhüttl has had to play. He does have options in attack, but none of those ideal. Nathan Redmond is a possibility who has been deployed up front in the past, and also Nathan Teller, who played midweek. But he's young, and whether he starts in back-to-back games remains to be seen. So they only have one experienced, recognised centre forward as it currently stands.
Now, with those players missing and also Ivan Toney being a major doubt for Brentford, Dan, you're going for goals in this game. Can you just tell us why that is and maybe what you've seen in the form books that allude to goals being scored here?
Yeah, I've had some good value on the goals market in Southampton's matches in the last few weeks. I'm going for it again here. I think both sides will see it as a pretty winnable match, even if they haven't got many of their best attacking players playing. I think that sometimes forces managers to make other players play in a more attacking way. I think it'll be a fairly open one as well. There's been an average of 4 goals in each of Brentford's last 4 away matches in the league. They've conceded 10 in that time. Southampton, meanwhile, have had over 2.5 goals in 5 of the last 6. Both teams to score is an option here, but if you're back in that, then you may as well just go for over 2.5. That's my bet for Southampton versus Brentford at 1.92.
And Rory, I think you're in agreement with that bet, right? You're expecting a few goals here down on the South Coast.
Yeah, I think Southampton win the game. I don't think I'm not on this Brentford hype train. I don't think they're very good. I think they could well go down. And I think that Southampton will win the game. I've gone for 2-1 Southampton.
Yeah, I'm going for a more cagey affair. I'm going for a 1-0, like those for Southampton, by the way. So with those injuries, I feel like it should just cut the attacking threat of both sides. And yeah, obviously the absences of Ivan Toney potentially. So I'm going for a 1-0 home win. But Ben, let's have your prediction, and it's one of your famous 1-1s.
Yeah, I couldn't help but slip this one in. Again, a very difficult game to predict. We've already heard from Thomas Frank. Brentford, 9 players at the time of the press conference on Thursday morning tested as positive. But as we approach the end of that media briefing, there was another 4 tests. So 13 players or 13 members of the team have tested positive. And this is big question marks on whether this game actually goes ahead. Given the injuries as well, I think the pendulum does sort of swing towards Southampton. But I think, that camaraderie in the face of adversity, the Bees will come together, and I think they can leave St Mary's with a share of the spoils. I'm going 1-1.
I like it. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. We're going to talk about Watford against Crystal Palace. Again, a game that's probably going to be in doubt due to COVID. Watford with that late postponement against Burnley in midweek. But we're going to carry on as if the game is going ahead as far as we know. But Dan, you take us through your best bet for this game, looking at Watford on the Asian handicap.
Yeah, I was leaning just towards Watford here. I had this bet at the start of the week, obviously, before all the COVID stuff. But I thought about the goals market going over 2.75, but I just went for the home result in the end. I think Watford are due a result. They've lost 4 in a row, but they've scored in each of them, including those games against Chelsea, Manchester City. I think Palace showed in midweek, as they have throughout the season, that they aren't quite the finished article and concede a lot of goals. They haven't kept a clean sheet in 6. I'm going for Watford plus a quarter. That way, it's a half win if this match is a draw, which seems pretty likely. That's at 1.95 with Mansion bet.
All right, well, I'm going for actually a really high-scoring affair in this one. I feel like, like you mentioned as well, Watford are capable of scoring goals. I've got Dennis in my fantasy team. Hopefully, he can kind of come back to the score sheet. So I'm going for a 3-2 win for Palace. So going against that advice from Dan. But Rory, let's take us through your assessment of Watford and Palace and how you see this game going.
I mean, I just think Watford are abysmal. I know they've got quite a lively front three, but they are abysmal, aren't they? And I could see a world where Claudio Ranieri gets sacked. I really can. I think Claudio Ranieri could easily lose his job next, which is ridiculous considering that he's only just got there. But I think that they're in trouble. And when you compare that with what's been going on at Palace, I've been very impressed with Palace. I think Patrick Vieira's learning. I think he's getting better every week. The team that he's built there are really good, really capable. And I can see nothing aside from a Crystal Palace win. I don't see it being particularly high scoring, though. I've gone 2-0 Palace.
And Ben, do you echo those sentiments? Do you feel like Palace should be too strong here for Watford, or which way do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm going for Palace just to edge it again. We know that Watford didn't have enough players to fulfill their midweek fixture against Burnley, so that comes into consideration. I do like Emmanuel Dennis and Josh King up front for the Hornets, but as we've seen against Brentford, there's just a little bit of fragility in that Watford backline, and I think confidence is a big thing. And if Palace can get themselves in front, then I really can't see Watford breaking them down. They regressed and they just sat back too deep. They let Brentford come on. And I think the same could be happening, against Palace. So, yeah, I'm going for a tight one, but I think it'll be 1-0.
So, sorry, Dan, we're all going against your advice for this one. But let's see. We're now going to move on to our next in-feature game, and that is Chelsea against Wolves. So next up, we're going to talk about where Wolves host Chelsea at Molineux. Now, this game, I mean, let's get Rory's opinion on Chelsea. They've kind of been stop-start a little bit in the last few weeks. Are they overperforming points-wise compared to how they're actually playing on the pitch, in your view?
Are Chelsea overperforming, do you mean?
Yeah.
Or Wolves? No, Chelsea are overperforming. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a weird one, isn't it? Because when I talk about Chelsea for the last few weeks now, even going into the last month and a half, I've been flagging that I don't think Chelsea are particularly good. I don't think Chelsea are particularly efficient, and I'm not particularly impressed with what Chelsea are doing. But I look an idiot because Chelsea is sitting top of 2 leagues at the time. We were top of our Champions League group, and we were top of the Premier League. And at the time, I was saying I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced with the way we're playing. I don't like the look of our midfield at all. It's very lightweight. We're so reliant on particular individuals, and I can see a real vulnerable underbelly to the team. But it's very difficult to make that case when you're winning every week.
Yeah.
But it ultimately isn't sustainable because we're so average. And when you look at I think if you take our central midfield situation as a microcosm of our team, we're so average. We're so average central midfield. If you think when West Ham beat us, West Ham central midfield, we were up against Souček and Rice. That's head and shoulders above our midfield partnership that day, Jorginho and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And I know Jorginho is apparently the third best midfielder in the world, but that just makes a mockery of the whole Ballon d'Or award, doesn't it? Because he's not even the third best midfielder at Chelsea, and I genuinely mean that. So our midfield shows you quite how average we are. As soon as you scratch below the surface, so N'Golo Kanté is best player in the world in his position, therefore the best player at Chelsea. Kovacic I rate decent. Then you're looking at Loftus-Cheek, Jorginho, Barkley, that Sal Niguez who came in, who's just abysmal. And the third best midfielder at Chelsea is actually doing the business at Palace. Conor Gallagher should be playing for Chelsea. Conor Gallagher is somebody that we need. So I think that we're very lightweight there. The injury to Marcus Alonso, the injury to Ben Chilwell, meaning that Marcus Alonso plays, the drop-off between Chilwell and Alonso is not dissimilar to the drop-off from Alonso to me. It's that level of drop-off. So I think that we're really beatable and so average. Romelu Lukaku, by the way, scored the same amount of goals this season as John Stones in the league. You just think, do you see why I'm so worried about this Chelsea team? Like it's so difficult to make the case because people come fire back at you and they're like, Champions of Europe, mate, top of the league, top of your Champions League group. But when you watch it week in, week out, it was smoke and mirrors. We're very beatable.
Yeah, that's it. For how long can they kind of maintain that look, right? I mean, looking at the stats as well. I mean, Dan, you kind of go deep into the XG of things, and yeah, Chelsea are overperforming in both areas, XG for and XG against. So how long, in your view, can they actually maintain this? And from a betting perspective, is there value to be betting against them at the moment?
Yeah, I do take XG into account when making the bets, but it's not the only kind of metric that I use. I think it does have its weaknesses. I think it depends on the team. If you look at last season, Brighton were fifth in the table for expected points at 61.41. If you only looked at the underlying data, then you'd be backing them to win most of the matches they play. In the end, they finished 2 places above the relegation zone on 41. Then compare that to Tottenham. They've overperformed based on their expected points in each of the last 4 seasons. They've picked up around 36.5 more points than the data suggests they should have in that time. So I take the data into account, but I take it with a pinch of salt and compare it with other things that I think are more important, like the quality of the squad. Chelsea obviously have a great squad, but only a few of them tend to outperform their XG. Romelu Lukaku and Timo Werner tend to stay very true to it or even underperform it slightly. So yeah, you could argue that underlying data has caught up with them in recent weeks, but I think the injuries in midfield and at left back have hurt them a lot more, as Rory said.
Now, also just moving on to Wolves as well. Ben, let's have an update on, was it Hwang that got injured in midweek? And obviously Jimenez is going to be out after that stupid red card.
Yeah, so Hwang actually pulled up early doors with a hamstring issue. I mean, generally the Wolves camp has been, fairly sort of injury-free. In touch wood, there are no positive COVID cases as it currently stands. But they lost 2 players in that game. They lost Ait Nouri in the build-up as well with a groin problem. And that brings Marcal in. And the Brazilian maybe isn't quite up to speed. So that's going to be an issue. But we will see Raul Jimenez back. So he just had a 1-game ban for the 2 yellow cards. So he could come back in for Hui Chang. And Traore, I would expect maybe to come back into that starting 11. He was dropped for Trincao through the week there. I mean, I'm certainly not impressed with Wolves. I don't particularly like how Bruno Lage sets up, particularly against the big teams. We've seen them sit very deep against the likes of Liverpool, Manchester City. And yeah, you can maybe question, it's the same argument you have with Rory. You can question those tactics and people say, well, they only conceded 1 against City. and that was a penalty. But to me, they never looked or they never wanted to go out for those 3 points. They were fairly happy to just sit in there and say, look, you break us down and see what you can bring. And I expect more of the same this weekend.
And that's it, yeah, for you, Rory, as well. I mean, how do you expect Chelsea to actually go up against this Wolves side who aren't conceding a lot, but they're not scoring a lot either? They've only scored 2 in the last 7.
I mean, we need to go for the jugular, but that's not quite how we play. Like, everything that's good about Chelsea when it works is a defensive unity and solidity that makes us very difficult to beat. And then we have the brilliance of, well, in theory, the brilliance of Hakim Ziyech and Kai Havertz and Timo Werner to do the business. But everything that's good about Chelsea is the fact that we don't really concede goals. I mean, there was a time this season when I genuinely thought that the one record that I thought would stand the test of time and now still do was that 15 goals that John Terry, Ricardo Carvalho and Petr Cech conceded in one season. I thought that of all records, that one will remain. And there was a time this year when I thought Chelsea could hold on to that. Then we went and conceded about 9 goals in a week, so I suddenly changed my opinion on that. But yeah, everything that we do is not to concede. Whereas now we concede goals for fun. We really are relying on Lukaku and Timo Werner. And I think if you ever say the sentence that you're relying on Timo Werner, you're probably in for a pretty rude awakening, aren't you? So Chelsea are relying on Timo Werner to get us over the line, or some of our attacking players to get us over the line against Wolves. And that is why I'm very nervous about this game. I've obviously predicted a Chelsea win because that's what I want to happen. But I'm nervous because I am quite impressed with what Wolves have been doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's hand it over to Dan then. What are the keys for Wolves to get a result in this game, in your opinion?
Yeah, kind of following on what you guys have been talking about. I think they need to frustrate and counter. I think that's been the name of the game for Bruno Lage's side in the last few weeks. They've conceded 2 goals in their last 5 Premier League games. Those came in the matches against Liverpool and Manchester City. Only the top 3 sides have conceded fewer goals than Wolves this season. I think they'll need to do something similar here. They need to pressure the middle. Chelsea have conceded a lot of goals recently as a result of individual errors, especially from their backline and midfield. Conceded stupid penalties against West Ham and Leeds. Jorginho has had 2 errors leading to goals in the last few weeks as a result of high pressure. There's a definite weakness there for Wolves to exploit as a result of the injuries in Chelsea's midfield. I think they're missing Kante and especially Kovacic is passing through the lines. I think their best chance of a goal is to kind of press Chelsea's midfield and force those errors. But they do need to score more goals as well. I mean, yeah, come to me for the groundbreaking analysis, but they need to score more goals. Only Norwich.
Very David Moyes. Do you remember that David Moyes quote?
Yeah, we need to score more and concede less. Yeah. Only Norwich have actually scored fewer goals than Wolves have this season. That one against Brighton in the midweek was their first for 5 games. They'll have Raul Jimenez back for this one, as Ben said, but he's only found the net 3 times this season. The positive is that if their defense holds up like it has in recent matches, then they won't need to score too many to get something out of the game.
And Ben, moving on to you as well. One player I don't think we've discussed too much about is Mason Mount, who is in a rich vein of form. So again, what are your keys for Chelsea here to get a comfortable win?
Yeah, big fan of Mason Mount. Very clever. Can look those, finds the pass. Great late runs into the box. Loves to get on the score sheet. I know what you're saying about Wolves, and yeah, there may be an opportunity there for Chelsea to be able to, to press them into mistakes, but I just don't see them doing that. I see this as an opportunity to really take advantage of Wolves and how they'll set up, maybe create the overload on both flanks with Reece James and Marcus Alonso, rely on the likes of Mount and maybe a Hakim Ziyech, or a Christian Pulisic maybe to unlock that door. We do know that there's been 1 or 2 injuries in that Wolves camp. They haven't got a big squad, so Bruno Lage has already said they are a little bit stretched. Connor Cody is a player that's been managing an ankle problem now for the last month. And it remains to be seen whether Romelu Lukaku will have his first start since recovering from that high ankle sprain in the league. Thomas Tuchel thinks that the centre-forward now is ready to play 70-plus minutes, but as it currently stands, they have a game midweek, and then we will see ahead of this weekend.
Ben, I think you make a strong case for a Chelsea win. I'm going that route as well. I know, Rory, you're expecting Chelsea to win. But Dan, you're going for a different mindset here for your value bets. So talk us through why you're backing Wolves on the Asian handicap.
Yeah, I'm just leaning towards... I can see it being a low-scoring game, so I thought about under 2.5 goals maybe, but I think the bookies agree, so the odds aren't great. I just have a feeling that both sides are going to get on the score sheet here, considering Chelsea's defensive weaknesses. That's why I'm going for Wolves +1 in the Asian line. That's at 1.97 with Unibet.
Now, I know, you may be not so confident on this, but I do want to shout out your track record from last week. We did have, 8 out of 9 winners. So, yeah, I mean, there is value to be had there. Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? But Rory, Ben, and I are all disagreeing with you on this one yet again. So, yeah, not fully supported by the team here, but you are in great form.
Hang on, I'm fully supported by me, by the way. I follow. I'm changing. I follow Dan. He's our leader.
6 out of 8 in the Champions League the week before as well. Just saying.
Mate, that's unreal. Mate, this is like in Sister Act when she's singing about like following her leader. I'm Whoopi Goldberg.
All right, so we'll put a green tick by Rory on this one then.
Sister Act. Oh,
I wasn't expecting that.
But Ben and myself, we're disagreeing. Sorry, Dan. But yeah, hopefully you've done enough. You've done enough to convince Rory anyway. But let's see how we do. All right, now we're going to move on to another round of quick fire predictions. All right, so the next game we're going to look at is Leeds against Arsenal. So some big controversy here in the Arsenal camp. Rory, let's get your point of view on Aubameyang, the situation there. I mean, how disruptive would it be for this Arsenal side?
Well, I thought it was an error from Arteta. I thought it was a real error to go to war, and that's effectively what he did. The way that he spoke about Aubameyang, and he kind of went for the jugular, didn't he? He was talking about his lack of commitment and professionalism. You think if you're going to do that to a player, it's risky. It's really risky because it's also the kind of decision that can get you the sack. If you go to war with a senior player and the rest of the squad back that player, you could be in real trouble. But it seemed to work. You look at their performance against West Ham; it was one of their best performances of the season, I think. It seemed to work, but I just wonder if Arteta's got this one right. I think the easiest thing to do when you see a situation like this is to say, "Oh, it's fantastic, bit of discipline, some strong draconian stuff from the manager. It's exactly what this squad need." But I just don't know if it is the correct thing to do to really hang out a senior player to dry like this. It seems to be working so far. They got a very good result, but I think the jury is still out. Aubameyang, from what we understand, went to see his mother and came back a day late. I don't know 100% that it was the correct thing to do. Time will tell.
And then, just bring in Ben here as well, just to get your point of view. I mean, how effective can this kind of situation be on a squad in general?
Look, I'm raging with the situation. I'm not a big fan of Mikel Arteta by any stretch. But let's not paper over this. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, this isn't his first disciplinary breach. Yes, he went to see his mother, but he's still in breach. He was supposed to return on the Wednesday night. He didn't. He chose to return on the Thursday. He therefore, because of the COVID restrictions, missed training. The guy then is told not to bother to come to training and then post all over Instagram, smiling and carry on and getting a new tattoo to add to his collection. What kind of message does that send out to the fans? For me, it should have happened a long time ago. I seen his miss against Newcastle, the one from, I think, was 2 yards out after Dubravka palmed it into his feet. The guy turned away and smiled and laughed. I think you have to question his commitment. I question what he does off the field. I question, does he represent Arsenal? And, internally, again, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the squad? He can basically do what he wants when he wants. Absolutely not. Great decision from Mikel Arteta. And I think that's we've seen and reflected, the performances. Arsenal play better without Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in recent times. And he deserves to be out of the squad and stripped of his captaincy.
All right, I think it's fair to say let's not annoy Ben with anything in this show because it's not going to go easy on us. But let's get to Dan and your prediction for this one. Arsenal have been in decent form without Aubameyang. So, let's get your view and the best bet for this game.
Yeah, I think most of the fireworks have gone off earlier this week. I don't think it's going to be the most exciting match at Elland Road. I can see Leeds pressing high, kind of forcing Arsenal to go long, which I don't like doing. They struggle to create chances in away matches at the best of times, but I think it'll be even harder with that high press. Leeds are lacking goals. They've only got 5 in their last 5. I think the last 2 defeats against Chelsea and Manchester City have been outliers in that. There usually aren't too many goals in their matches, especially at home. The average for the season is 2.5. And Arsenal tend to struggle in matches directly after a big win, like the one they got against West Ham in midweek. They're away from home. They've lost 3 of the last 3 away games. Only three sides have actually scored fewer goals in away games than Arsenal have this season, which I think is crazy. One of them has 2 games in hand as well. That's why I'm going for under 2.5 goals. That's 2.18 with Matchbook.
Very good. I'm going for actually the opposite. I'm going for a big scoring game in this one. I feel like Arsenal, yeah, I know the struggles of the away form as well are an issue, but I feel like they should be too strong. But Rory, let's get your view on Leeds after they came up pretty well against Chelsea and scoring a lot of goals as well. 3-2, wasn't it, the Chelsea game? So, yeah, do you expect some goals here?
Yes, I think there'll be some goals, and I'm hoping that, weirdly, it's not often I say this, but I'm kind of hoping they'll be scored by Leeds. But yeah, I mean, I found the Leeds game against Manchester City. I mean, for the first time, I became a Bielsa disciple. Everything they say about him, it's exciting stuff. It's poetry to watch. Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved every minute of that game against Man City, and I hope that continues, with the exception of their game against Arsenal. It'd be great if Leeds could get something against Arsenal, and I think they can. I think that we sort of getting trounced by Man City. It happens. There's no real shame in that. But Leeds were very good against Chelsea, and Chelsea were incredibly lucky. So if you can do that to Chelsea, if they can just galvanise after that defeat, I don't know how damaging a defeat like that will be to them and to Bielsa and to his ethos and everything. But if they can just find a bit of rhythm, I do believe that Arsenal will be there for the taking for them. So I've actually gone for a Leeds 2-1 victory.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. I mean, yeah, how demoralising that 7-0 defeat would be. But Ben, let's get your point of view as well. Did they just kind of run out of steam after putting in such an effort against Chelsea? That's why they lost so heavily against City, do you think?
I think personnel is an issue. Again, missing a number of key players, particularly in that back line. And even Calvin Phillips, he's going to be a big miss. Had hamstring surgery, so we expect him to be out for maybe 2 to 3 possibly months there. Liam Cooper as well in that back line. So there are issues, Dan James as well in attack, and also Shackle were removed from that game. There's no Patrick Bamford at this moment in time. So you've got to give context to that. And yes, look, City on their day can do that to some of the best teams in Europe. But for me as well, I just don't see a plan B ever with Bielsa. It's go out, it's run, it's high energy, it's high press. We've seen on occasions this season, I think they should have left St. James's Park with 3 points. For me, I'm criticising, somebody who's loaded within the game here, but I just think there's maybe a way of managing games. We experienced it with Kevin Keegan back in the day, the entertainers. We would go out, we would try to blow teams away when ultimately that, it got us in a position to win the league. But, during that run-in, did that actually go against us? Sometimes you just need to close up shop and get the points when you can. And I just don't see that with Bielsa. Again, maybe that's just down to personnel, or maybe that's it. It's just this one-track mind, and we'll go out and we play regardless. As a neutral, it's great to see. It's, I like watching Leeds, but in this game, I mean, I'm not sure if it was influenced heavily by the Aubameyang disciplinary, but I've went for a comfortable Arsenal victory. I'm not really bothered too much about their away form. I think, again, Leeds will want to play for Bielsa, who's coming under a lot of pressure in terms of his management from various media outlets. But, I think if they concede early on in Lacazette, he handed the armband, gotten a little bit of form. I think if Arsenal get that early goal, they can certainly move forward and win comfortably.
All right, so we're all again in disagreement with Dan, but let's move on to the next game. We're going to look at Everton against Leicester. Leicester, of course, smashing Newcastle 4-0 last time out. Unfortunately, their game against Spurs tonight on Thursday, as we're recording this, is cancelled. But Dan, you do have a good bet for Everton-Leicester, also favouring Everton on the Asian handicap.
Yeah, a big question mark over this game, as you say. But if it does go ahead, then I'm going to be back in Everton. Their home form isn't actually as bad as people think. They've won 4 and drawn 1 of their last 8 at home this season. 2 of those defeats came against West Ham and Liverpool, and they did pretty well at times in both matches. The defeat to Watford is their only truly awful performance at home this season. Leicester are on form, but they're just so inconsistent. It's hard to back them with any confidence. I can see both sides scoring, but if I'm giving the edge to the Toffees, I'm backing Everton +0 at 2.12. That way you'll get your stakes back if it finishes all square. So it's essentially a draw no bet.
Yeah, and Rory, let's have your view on Everton-Leicester. Which way do you see it going?
The same way as Dan. I'm over the moon. I'm over the moon. I finally got one right, because that's how it feels now. It feels like Dan's just delivering spoilers rather than predictions. So yeah, I'm going for that as well. I think that Everton have just enough in them to keep Benitez in a job, and just enough in them to get enough points to basically do the bare minimum, but not get caught up in a relegation fight. I also think that Leicester are incredibly vulnerable. I'm not a huge fan of Brendan Rodgers, and I think that the victory that they got against Newcastle, I watched that game, and as good as they were, it was men versus boys. Like, there was no contest, so you can't read too much into that result at all.
So Ben, let's have your thoughts on that comment regarding Newcastle as well. Just that manner of their defeat against Leicester. What did you make of it?
I was absolutely raging. I expected to go down to the King Power, given the team news, to put on a show, to potentially leave with a point. I would have been happy with a 1-1, come away, and it was embarrassing. There was absolutely no excuse for that. Eddie Howe out. Do you know what I mean? It was an absolute shocker of a performance, because I don't rate Leicester, not one bit. And with the changes, we even seen Jamie Vardy on the bench. I know Patson Daka got himself a goal and an assist, and he looked sharp as attack. Good player. But Tielemans just coming off the back of an injury. Maddison, form indifferent. I think there was a chance there for us to leave Leicester with something, possibly even hope for 3 points after that, win over Burnley. But we let ourselves down badly in that game, and I think, we need to make changes. So for that reason, Brendan Rodgers is bang off my Christmas card list. But I'm not a fan of Rafa either, so I'm going for one of my famous 1-1 draws.
Lovely stuff. I'm thinking that James Maddison actually did impress me against Newcastle, so I feel like he'll actually kick on a little bit more, as we know he has the potential to. So I'm going for a Leicester win in this one, 2-0 for Leicester away. That's what I'm going for. But anyway, let's move on to, again, we're going to talk now about Newcastle, Ben. So maybe hold on to your hat a little bit, because they're coming up against Man City this weekend. And what are your expectations for this game, being a Newcastle fan?
And my expectations are that I have no expectations whatsoever, other than a Manchester City comfortable win. There's absolutely no heart overhead here. There's no sugarcoating it. If we play anything like we did last weekend, we'll be lucky to keep it down to the 4 that I predict City will score. I fancied Federico Fernandez to come into that backline. He did impress against Norwich, but now he's out for the season. I think Eddie Howe needs to shuffle the pack a little bit, freshen that squad. I think we will get a goal. Maybe that's more of hope than anything else, but it's going to be down to City and however many they want to score on the day. But I'm going for 4 and keeping my fingers crossed it's no more than that.
Yeah, all right then. So let's have your top bet for this one, Dan. Again, looking at the total goals market.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Ben. I can see goals here. Manchester City are starting to take things up a gear in terms of their attacking output. After that demolition of Leeds in midweek, they've scored 11 in their last 3. They'll also have João Cancelo back for this one. Not that they missed him in midweek, really. They're usually high-scoring games when these two sides meet. I think there's been 3+ goals in 6 of the last 8 meetings between them. City won this match 4-3 last season, so I think the value is in a high-scoring match, even if the goal line is a little higher than I'd like it to be. I'm going for over 3.25 goals. That way you'll get half your stake back if there are exactly 3 in the game. That's a 1.98 with Mansion Bet. Yeah,
I'm definitely in agreement as well. And I think, Rory, you are here as well. It's just a case of how many for City, right?
Yeah, 5-0. I've gone 5-0 City, and that's City playing in about second gear. I think Newcastle are abysmal. I really do, and I don't think that Eddie Howe's the right man for that job. But I feel like I just say that all the time. Sack 'em. I'm the Grim Reaper for managers. But I really do think it with regard to Eddie Howe. I just can't see how he's been brought in at this time. It doesn't feel like the club have any real oversight, like long-term vision. They were considering Unai Emery, then all of a sudden they're considering Eddie Howe. The 2 are chalk and cheese. How can you consider one and one be right, and then go for the exact opposite and think that it's the second choice? They should never be on the same list. You look at the way they played against Leicester. I think Leicester are terrible as well, and they made them look so good. That midfield pairing of Shelvey and Willock is probably the worst midfield pairing in the league. It's probably the worst midfield pairing in the league. I'm not even convinced it's better than that's not as good as Fulham's, is it? Like, those two don't get in a Fulham team, they don't get in a Bournemouth team. I'm not convinced they're getting a Stoke team, QPR team. They're so bad. They're so average. And like I say, I think 5-0, and this is 5-0 with Man City saying, do you know what, Bernardo Silva, you can have the day off. Maybe give Grealish a bit of a rest. This is 5-0 against the reserves, at best for Newcastle. That's a good day at the office for Newcastle as well.
Well, Ben, let's have your quick reaction to that statement as well.
Where do I start? I mean, it's hard to argue with. So, I mean, it's a little bit strong, maybe, the Shelvey and Willock partner. They're not great, but are they the worst in the league? I'm sure there's got to be some players worse than that.
Tenor, if you can name a worse midfield pairing.
Chelsea's last week.
Jorginho and Loftus-Cheek.
Yeah, maybe, fair.
But I think he could bring Isaac Hayden in to add a little bit of steel into that midfield, potentially. Might go with a 4-5-1 or a 5-3-2 and shut up shop. But yeah, look, this is down to Pep and City and however many they decide to score, really. If you can get 7 against Leeds and you're in tip-top condition, then, it could be double figures.
All right, well, before we move on to our final In Focus game, just want to get confirmation now. It has been confirmed that United Brighton will be postponed. So kind of forget what we said about the bet in the beginning of the show, because that game is now null and void. But anyway, let's move on to our last game we're going to talk about, and that will be Spurs against Liverpool. Now, of course, Spurs have been affected by the COVID outbreak, having one of their games postponed. So, Ben, just take us through maybe what impact do you think that will have on Spurs individually? I mean, which players have been out and, how they're going to try and recover in time for the Liverpool match?
Yeah, so the issues that we have in and around COVID and the questions that are often asked, why don't the clubs actually divulge which players have been suffering? And that's due to medical confidentiality. So unless the player sort of gives a green light or announces it themselves, we're left to sort of read between the lines. So with regards to Tottenham, some suggestion, just from individuals or lack of players from the training pitches, the likes of Lucas Moura, Heung-min Son, they've all been missing. Now, what that means is it doesn't matter, how much training they're able to get away from that training pitch. This isn't a competitive environment. They're not able to do any functional work. Yes, you can maintain base levels of fitness, but unless you're in these highly charged environments where you're pushing yourselves against, your teammates, your opponents, you're not going to be able to gain that edge. And of course, Tottenham had the game cancelled against Rennes. They had the game cancelled due to weather with Burnley as well. So now you're talking about players who are going to be coming into a game, and just that little bit of, I suppose, rustiness, given that preparations haven't been great. So it's going to be difficult just to, even if these players are being asymptomatic, to expect them to come in and hit the ground running. It's going to be a big push, and it's going to take a huge effort, to get anything from this game.
And just to bring in Rory here as well, looking at Conte back in his time managing Chelsea, I mean, how do you think, or how do you remember him dealing with injury crisis and maybe fixture congestion? Was he actually pretty good at managing the squad, or do you think he might struggle at Tottenham?
No, he won't struggle with anything. He's a genius. He's also a Judas whore, but he's also a genius. I think he's an incredible manager. I think that there is nothing that he can't do. And the reason that Tottenham have, in my opinion, probably the second best chance to make the top 4 after Manchester United is purely because of him. Because I think the squad is fairly average. Even the better players in that team aren't playing well. But when you have Antonio Conte at the helm, anything is possible. And the way that he will navigate virtually any terrain is so impressive, and I can certainly see him working his magic on this squad. Tottenham to get in the top 4, I can genuinely see it being a possibility, which is heartbreakingly true.
But of course, they are coming up against Liverpool this weekend. So let's talk about Liverpool. I mean, we've identified maybe some issues at Chelsea. Man City, there's not really a lot of weaknesses in their team, but do you see any kind of weakness in this Liverpool squad and potential for Spurs to kind of get at them?
I do. I think that Liverpool are slightly vulnerable at times. Yes, I think that they are. I mean, I think we've seen it on various occasions this season that they can get it slightly wrong, and I can actually see Tottenham getting something out of this game. I don't think Tottenham can win it, but there's no reason why they can't get a draw. And I think because of what Manchester City are doing, because of the pressure that they're piling on, because of City's relentlessness and the fact that they're only just getting into sort of third gear now. They're already, when you think how easy Man City won the league last year, they're 6 points better off now than they were this time last year. So I think that because of the pressure that City are putting on them, Liverpool will feel desperate to get a victory. They know that they're losing players in January, and that could almost be their downfall this round of fixtures. I think Tottenham could get a draw.
Well, that's it. I mean, yeah, you touched on their players that are potentially missing, of course, the African Cup of Nations coming up. So, Dan, from a betting point of view, let's bring you in here. I mean, how big a miss will those players be, the likes of Salah and Mane, of course?
Yeah, I've got a piece coming out next week actually on bettingexpert.com/news, which will go into a bit more detail. I've basically gone back and looked at how Premier League clubs have got on while missing players to the Africa Cup of Nations or the Asian Cup over the past few seasons. It often dominates these news stories when the players go away, people worrying about the club size, how they're going to cope, but found that largely there's not that much of a drop-off in terms of results. Bookies and punters definitely overestimate the importance of clubs losing these players. Looked at 99 matches involving teams that had lost at least one first-team player to a mid-season tournament. Found that backing those sides during that time had a return of plus 17.8 units. A couple of results are doing much of the heavy lifting there, but it does carry over to the Asian lines as well. The teams that are missing players had a 55.8 win percentage on the Asian handicap. It's a profit of 8%. I think it makes sense. Players miss matches throughout the season without warning. Injuries and suspensions can happen at any time. I think the only time you know if a suspension is coming is if a player is one yellow card away from a ban in the Champions League and Jose Mourinho is the manager. Then you can be a bit more certain. But I think with these international tournaments, you can prepare squad rotation plans months in advance. That definitely helps. A lot of clubs are going to lose players to AFCON this season, and obviously you take things on a case-by-case basis. Liverpool are going to be hurt more than most, but I think history suggests that by and large, the clubs probably won't find it as difficult as people think.
So if anything, yeah, if you see the bookies maybe giving a bit better odds for Liverpool because Salah and Mane are missing, still back them anyway because they should be strong enough to win. But Dan, Ben, moving on to you now, and the case for Tottenham. How do you think they can actually get at this Liverpool side? What keys do you think could be for Conte going into the fixture?
I mean, it's difficult, again, because of reading between the lines. We had hoped to have some kind of insight into which players he would have at his disposal on Thursday evening. That isn't going to happen now. But potentially, and this is a long reach, but maybe, we've seen Conte go with a 3-4-3. And, if hopefully Sergio Reguilon and Emerson Royal on the either flank, they could maybe use to push and maybe try to counteract the threat of Robertson and Trent. I know it's going to be a big ask, particularly of COVID and injury, but maybe that's an opportunity at least to sort of press those players back. And also there's going to be room in and around, and in behind Trent. It's an area that has been identified before, but, maybe Liverpool are just a little bit of a juggernaut at the moment. Can Tottenham carry on that confidence from that early start, under Conte, possibly? And I'm hoping maybe I can make a case for maybe Mo Salah being rested for the game. Now, of course, Liverpool play Newcastle at the time of recording still, but what we've seen in the previous 3 seasons, Mo Salah has always been rested at least once during the first 16, 17 game weeks of every season. He's been benched 10 times in the Premier League for Liverpool throughout his career. On 7 of those occasions, he has came off the bench and he scored and assisted, but in the last 3, he's been rested in December, in and around this game week ahead of that busy fixture period. So maybe Jurgen Klopp will have one eye on the Newcastle game, thinking that's a gimme, and he's potentially that. But if not, then maybe it's that Tottenham game that he earmarks for a rest for Salah.
And looking at Klopp as well and how he might approach the game, it's going to be interesting to see how he comes up against Conte, given the fact that Liverpool, they've been getting results, of course, beating Wolves and Villa, but only by a goal each time. So Dan, maybe just talk us through maybe the keys for Liverpool in this one and how they're going to go up against Conte's style of football.
Yeah, set pieces. I think there's a good chance for Liverpool from set pieces here. Tottenham haven't conceded too many goals, but almost a quarter of them have been from set pieces or dead ball scenarios. Fortunately for Liverpool, that's an area they're very strong in. They've scored 8 goals from set pieces this season. That's the joint most in the Premier League alongside Arsenal. I think Spurs should be wary about giving away pointless free kicks and corners. Liverpool, I think, should attack the left-hand side. I've noticed a lot of goals and chances Tottenham conceded under Antonio Conte have come down that right flank. Whether it's Emerson or Tanganga playing, there's usually a lot of space to attack. The problem is that Liverpool are a little one-sided on the other flank. They tend to build up down the right through Trent Alexander-Arnold and Mo Salah, understandably so. 40% of their attacks have started down the right. That's the joint highest in the Premier League. Maybe they'll get some luck here if they switch things up and exploit the weaknesses on the other side. If that happens, then I'm looking at Andy Robertson and Sadio Mane as the difference makers.
But let's have a look then at your best bet, because you're actually going for Spurs on the Asian handicap, right?
Yeah, I'm going the other way. I think Tottenham will get something out of the match. They're a tough side to beat at home, and I think the goals are starting to dry up for Liverpool, as you mentioned, Joe. They needed a late goal against Wolves and a penalty against Aston Villa to get the points. Spurs will be tough to break down. They've only conceded 1 goal in 4 Premier League games since Conte took over. I think the bookies have given Liverpool a little bit too much of an advantage in the Asian lines. I think it's a little bit unfair on Spurs, even with the situation that's going on at the club. That's why I'm going for Tottenham plus 3/4 of a goal. That's at 2.10 with Mansion Bet.
And Rory, I think you're backing that opinion as well, right? You think Spurs can get a result?
Yeah, I think Spurs can get a result. I think they can get a draw at least. I think I've gone for a 2-2 draw. That's just purely off the back. It's nothing to do with any of the Tottenham players, really. I just rate Conte so highly that I find it very difficult to see beyond him. However, I do hope I'm completely wrong and Liverpool win 5-0.
And Ben, for you, which way do you see it going?
Yeah, I think Liverpool edge this one, 2-1. I just think coming off the back of, missing those games, players aren't going to be 100%. And Liverpool, the best attacking team, not only in the Premier League, but maybe in and around Europe, with one of the best players in the world currently in Mo Salah. Whether he starts or not remains to be seen. But I still think, in Diego Jota, Sadio Mane, Firmino's coming back, Divock Origi, if he's fit, there's plenty of options there for Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to go against Dan's advice in this one, just going for a 2-0 Liverpool win. I feel like, again, there will be just too strong. All right, but let's just go and give you a quick roundup of all of the picks from this weekend's round of fixtures. You can see them now on screen. So, Rory, I mean, you've been able to change some of your views based on Dan's advice. But which bet kind of stands out for you as the most likely to happen this weekend?
Oh, I think the Tottenham one's probably the interesting one for value, isn't it? I think Tottenham getting something against Liverpool is probably the one where the value is, because not many people can see that happening. Whereas I think there's a very good chance of that. But I would just say whatever Dan thinks is now what I think.
Lovely stuff. And Dan, just from your perspective as well, which is the most confident bet that you've picked out this weekend?
I mean, we all backed it, but over goals, Newcastle, Man City, I can see City getting a fair few there. Maybe not 7, but close enough.
And sorry, Ben, that means that, Newcastle should get absolutely hammered. But that wraps it up for this week's edition of The Big Stage. Thanks a lot to my guests, Rory Jennings, Ben Dinnery and Dan Jenkins, as ever. We'll be back very soon with another edition of The Big Stage. And if you do place a bet, follow Dan's advice, then please do gamble responsibly.